Father, we thank you for your great love towards us, and we thank you that we can begin the meetings again. We pray for grace to do your will. May we follow the word as it comes to us. And bless us. Amen. Today we'll begin proper diet. Now, I don't know how far we'll get into this. There's so much on it. But we'll start and we'll see. Ministry of Healing, page 305. We must remember as we are reading these that it's Jesus talking to us. Page 305, the free use of hot drinks is debilitating. So the very first thing we come up with in diet is that we should not be using hot drinks of any kind. CD 382, a diet of flesh meat tends to develop animalism. A development of animalism lessens spirituality, rendering the mind incapable of understanding truth. So eating meat does a lot of things. It makes us unable to understand truth. TE 77. The action of coffee and many other popular drinks is similar. The first effect is exhilarating. The nerves of the stomach are excited. These convey irritation to the brain. So you'll notice the first effect of, she's using the word coffee here, the first effect is exhilarating. So if we find that when we drink coffee, we're perked up, well, that's what the first effect of it. We get perked up. The nerves of the stomach are excited and convey irritation to the brain. So we ought to think about that. We might feel exhilarated, but the effect of that exhilaration is irritation to the brain. We are irritating the brain. This in turn is aroused to impart increased action to the heart. So we have this feeling of excitement, and what's happening is an increased action to the heart and short-lived energy to the entire system. So we have short-lived energy. We have energy. Fatigue is forgotten. The strength seems to be increased. The intellect is aroused. The imagination becomes vivid. We take all of those things to be something necessary. But you'll notice this is said in a very negative way here. The imagination is a bit more vivid. 2T65. Tea and coffee drinkers carry the marks upon their faces. The skin becomes sallow and assumes a lifeless appearance. The glow of health is not seen upon the countenance. The tables of our American people are generally prepared in a manner to make drunkards. So the way we eat makes the way for becoming a drunkard. And she says that's the American way. Now that's strange that the country would have the problem. GW, page 230. When suffering from overwork, it would be much better to drop out a meal occasionally and thus give nature a chance to rally. And of course, she's talking to people who eat 3 meals a day. She said they ought to drop that third meal out and give the body a chance to catch up. CH 116. Our bodies are constructed from what we eat, and in order to make tissues of good quality, we must have the right kind of food. HL 76, the diet affects both physical and moral health. So I don't think that it's possible for the American people to think that their moral health comes out of what they eat. They don't think about that. Physical health, well, they might get that idea. But moral health is left out. And if moral health is left out, it's going to be awful hard to be religious. CH 85. Under the influence of unhealthful food, the conscience becomes stupefied. The mind becomes darkened, and its susceptibility to impressions is blunted. Well, there are three things, as she said there. The conscience is stupefied. The mind is darkened, and the susceptibility to impressions is blunted. So that's not very good. As we continue into diet and how we eat, we should think about these things. These are not just words. These are coming from Christ. He's trying to tell us something. 2T 400. It is impossible for those who indulge the appetite to attain to Christian perfection. So diet has a lot about reaching Christian perfection. You should study to prepare a simple yet nutritious diet. Flesh meats and rich cakes and pies, prepared spices of any kind, are not the most healthful and nourishing diet. Fruits and grains, prepared in the most simple form, are the most healthful and will impart the greatest amount of nourishment to the body and at the same time not impair the intellect. Regularity in eating is very important for a health of body and serenity of mind. Now, this regularity in eating, she has not mentioned that up to now. We ought to stop and think about that for just a moment. There ought to be set times in the day that we set aside just for eating. Now, that sounds simple enough, but if we set it aside just for eating, we won't be doing something else at the same time. How many of us listen to things on the radio or the TV or whatever while we're eating? You see, that's not regularity in eating. That's doing eating and something else. And what is it we're listening to? Does it give us a good digestion? Does it give us quiet? Does it let everything work so that what we're eating comes into our bodies properly? Or are we doing two things at the same time? Well, that's not going to work, especially if we do it in a regular way. We've got bad habits for regularity. To eat regularly means to eat at the same time every day. That means you have a time for eating. You just don't eat as you make room for it during the day. That is not regularity in eating. We have a specific time. We eat at the same time every day. And to have regularity for eating, we must just eat. 1T 548. Some are indulging lustful appetite which wars against the soul and is a constant hindrance to their spiritual development. Well, I think that's plain enough. CD, page 81. The Lord intends to bring his people back to live upon simple fruits, vegetables, and grains. Well, what is that? Simple fruits, vegetables, and grains. Well, that, simple enough, is a vegetarian diet. No meat. God produced fruit in its natural state for our first parents. What kind of fruit? Well, we know what fruit is. But Alan and I particularly picked out grapes, big grapes. They ate grapes and grains. And they were supposed to eat that forever. Following that on page 82, their diet is to consist of the foods made from the materials he has provided. The materials principally used in these foods will be fruits, grains, and nuts. She didn't say nuts the first time, and nuts and various roots will also be used. So fruits, vegetables, and grains, and nuts. It's important that we eat some nuts and roots that grow on the ground. So there's a variety we begin to see. On page 81, it says grains, fruits, nuts, and vegetables constitute the diet chosen for us by our Creator. So we have to read and study and put it together to see what it is we can eat. And there's a lot of things there. 1T, page 491. How to prevent disease by a wise use of heaven remedies, pure water, air, and diet. 2T 366. I have spoken of the importance of the quantity and quality of food being in strict accordance with the laws of health. So she reminds us, when she talks about diet, she is talking about law, the law of health. 2T45, a plain diet free from spices and flesh meats and grease of all kinds would prove a blessing to you. Now she lands a little bit harder on spices in this small statement. A plain diet free from spices. We ought to think about this. When we sit down to eat, do we reach for a little bottle or a little container that has spice in it of some sort? Is that just automatic? Do we just do that? She says our diet should be free from all spices. And of course, that means cooking also. 2T 352. She says grains and fruits prepared free from grease and in as natural a condition as possible should be the food for the tables of all who claim to be preparing for translation to heaven. Now, she says a couple of important things here that we kind of slip over. First of all, grease comes from animal foods. Okay? So we should just leave it, meat alone. And then she says This is the kind of food that people who claim to be preparing for translation to heaven. Now, I want to ask you a question. When we use the translation, what do we usually mean when we're talking? Well, it's been my experience with Seventh-day Adventists that when they're talking about translation, there's only one person who's going to be translated, and that's the person who doesn't die. They are translated from life to heaven. And they call that the 144,000. So they put all their ideas together, and of course, as you study the various subjects, it doesn't work. What they believe, what they have put together, does not work. Translation to heaven cannot possibly mean the 144,000. Translation to heaven means from earth to heaven. And whether you die or not is not part of the situation. So we're misusing the word translation. I just point this out to you because she talks about translation throughout her writings, and it will not work for just people who don't die. All right. Education, page 204. Grains, fruits, nuts, and vegetables in proper combination contain all the elements of nutrition. So we don't need anything else. Our bodies just do not require eating anything besides grains, fruits, nuts, and vegetables. And of course, that includes the roots of the ground. It says, when properly prepared, they constitute the diet that best promotes both physical and mental strength. So there's no reason to eat meat. It's not necessary for nutrition. CH 115. He, God, has spread before him the product of the earth, a bountiful variety of food that is palatable to the taste and nutritious to the system. Of these, our benevolent Heavenly Father says we may freely eat fruits, grains, vegetables prepared in a simple way, free from spice and grease of all kinds. Make with milk or cream. Now notice this. She doesn't say we must never eat milk or cream. She says with milk or cream is the most healthful diet. They impart nourishment to the body and give a power of endurance and a vigor of intellect that are not produced by a stimulating diet. So she says, prepared without spices of any kind, free from spice and grease of all kinds, combined with milk and cream. And of course, when she got old and she wasn't eating very much, she said that for supper she would have milk with cream in it. And that was her diet, and she lived. Okay. HL 78, all the elements of nutrition are contained in the fruits, vegetables, and grains. So everything we need is in that. CH 573. Our first parents lost Eden through the indulgence of appetite. Our only hope of regaining Eden is through the firm denial of appetite and passion. Well, that's kind of a rough thing to get a hold of when you're first starting. But she says we must deny our desire for appetite and passion. We must come back to the way God set things up in the first place. HL, page 85. Now, we have mentioned this one, but I want you to notice that she says it in a particular way. You should never let a morsel pass between your lips between your regular meals. Eat what you ought, but eat it at one meal, and then wait until the next. So, we are not to eat anything in between meals. Now, if you're eating 2 meals a day, you have the regular times for your meals. You eat what you're going to eat at the meal time, and you never eat anything in between meals. Now, when she says never, that's what she means, because that's what Jesus told her. We are never to eat between meals. Page 84, same book. A second meal should never be eaten until the stomach has had time to rest from the labor of digesting the preceding meal. And she said that's 5 or 6 hours. So that's easy. We eat in the morning, and whatever time we eat, we can start counting 5 hours before the next meal. She said, or 6 hours. I don't know if people do that today. So you go your 5 hours, and then you eat again. And she says between that first meal and the second meal, you never eat anything else. Not a morsel. Oh, what's a morsel? That means a bite of something. And then after the second meal, you don't eat again until it's time for that first meal. You eat nothing in between the meals. And if people did that, their digestive system would work a completely different way. It would work then. We give ourselves medical problems when we don't do this. And we don't even know we're killing ourselves. 4T, 416. Some eat 3 meals a day, when 2 would be more conducive to physical and spiritual health. So she says it for the first time here. 2 meals is more conducive to the kind of health we want. HL 84, should these persons change their practice and eat 2 meals a day, the result would be seen in a good appetite and greatly improved health. Page 84, most people enjoy better health while eating 2 meals a day than 3. On page 83, she says 5 hours at least should be given between each meal. And always bear in mind that if you give it a trial, you would find 2 meals is better than 3. So she just tells us, why don't you try it and see what happens? CH 156. Most people enjoy better health while eating 2 meals a day than 3. Others, under their existing circumstances, may require something to eat at supper time. But she says if you're going to eat supper, make it a light meal. Matter of fact, she says make it very light. I don't suppose I should leave any of the words out. 2 SM 415, a second meal should never be eaten until the stomach has had time to rest from the labor of digesting the preceding meal. Now, if you eat 2 meals a day and you put 5 hours in between, you're not going to have a problem. Your body was designed to eat that way. You get up in the morning, you have fasted during the night, so your body's ready to eat. There's no problem. Your body is ready to eat. You eat and then you let 5 hours go by. It has digested the meal and your body is ready to eat again because you haven't taken a morsel of food in that 5 hours. You eat again and then you go until your breakfast, and your body gets used to that. And your body is in a constant round of good digestion. MM 282. Should these persons change their practice and eat but 2 meals a day and nothing between meals, not even an apple, a nut, or any kind. She says, a nut. Well, that's a very small thing. But she said, not even a nut or any kind of fruit. The result would be seen in good appetite and greatly improved health. So she says, not only should you eat 2 meals a day, but you shouldn't eat anything in between meals. 3 BC 1165. It was customary for the Hebrews to eat but twice a day. Now there's a fact. If you never knew that before, that is a fact that should go into your brain. The Hebrews as a nation ate 2 meals a day. The heartiest meal coming not far from the middle of the day. So that means the way people do it today is not right. Van Leeuwen used to tell people he eats like a king in the morning, and then he eats less for lunch, and then he eats a light meal for supper. Well, he had it all wrong. He ate 3 meals a day, and the biggest meal was breakfast. That's what he told people. Well, that's not right. We should just eat something to get us through the day, and then the biggest meal is lunchtime, and then nothing after that. If he had said that on TV, he'd had people cutting him off because he didn't have it in his mind. He didn't do it himself. Education, page 205. In most cases, 2 meals are preferable to 3. Supper, when taken at an early hour, interferes with the digestion of the previous meal. When taken later, it is not itself digested before bedtime. Thus, the stomach fails of securing proper rest. The sleep is disturbed, the brain and nerves are weary, the appetite for breakfast is impaired, the whole system is unrefreshed, is unready for the day's duties. Well, we just let that one sit the way it does. It's in the books, we should read it. GW 241, do not be hurried. Eat slowly and with cheerfulness, your heart filled with gratitude to God for all his blessings. And again, if you aren't reading the news while you're eating, you will be cheerful. I don't know how we could do that and be cheerful. HL 226. Water is the best liquid possible to cleanse the tissues. Drink some little time before or after the meal. Now she says water is good to drink. So we aren't to eat in between meals, but we should drink water in between meals. She's leaving out some of the words there, but we should put it together. We should drink water between the meals. Now, that also means we should not drink water at our meal. Now, that will change a lot of people's habits, just that one thing. Most people I know drink water with their meals. She says, don't do that. We'll get to it. We're learning things here, things that we have done that ruin our health. On page 89 of that book, if we take water with meals, water diminishes the flow of the salivary glands. And the colder the water, the greater the injury to the stomach. So if we don't drink water with the meals, none of that stuff will happen. So we should not drink water with our meals. 2T 485. There should have been a specified time for each meal, and the food should have been prepared in a simple form, free from grease. But pains should have been taken to have it nutritious, healthful, and inviting. So I think that's the first time we have read one of those. The meal should be inviting. We should want it. CD 173. The stomach must have careful attention. It must not be kept in continual operation. Give this misused and much abused organ some peace and quiet and rest. So it's a much abused organ. After the stomach has done its work for one meal, do not crowd more work upon it. Before it has had a chance to rest, and before a sufficient supply of gastric juice is provided by nature to care for more food. Now, we don't think about that either. The acids that are being produced, what we're pumping into our stomach. If we eat in between meals, while the stomach is beginning to rest or is done with its work, do you get the picture of what we're doing? The stomach is empty. We eat a little piece of candy or a little nut or some weird thing. And what we start up is the gastric juices. And now there's nothing to protect the stomach. So the gastric acids eat the stomach. So we are creating problems in our stomach by eating the smallest thing in between meals. 5 hours at least should elapse between each meal. And of course that means before we throw any more food in the stomach. And always bear in mind that if you would give it a trial, you would find that 2 meals are better than 3. CD, page 174. If a third meal be eaten at all, it should be light and several hours before going to bed. Now, when she says a light third meal, That's what she means. She's talking about some toast, maybe a little bit of milk with it, or some small bit of fruit. She's not talking about a full meal. Crackers, the English biscuit, or zwieback and fruit, or cereal, coffee, are the foods best suited for the evening meal. Now that's very light. A piece of toast. Unhealthful habits of eating are injuring thousands and tens of thousands. And of course, if she was living today, she'd have to say millions. Millions are being injured by the bad habits of eating. Food should be thoroughly, neatly prepared and appetizing. Page 91. Very hot food ought not to be taken into the stomach. Soups, pudding, and other articles of the kind are often eaten too hot, and as a consequence, the stomach is debilitated. So when something is hot, it should not be eaten. And of course, no hot drinks. People take hot drinks with their food. They shouldn't be doing that. The same book, page 90, I am advising the people wherever I go to give up liquid food as much as possible. So we shouldn't be eating hot soups. She just flat said it. And she says, I tell people, and wherever I go, to stop eating liquid food. But people continue with their soups. And of course, the pudding she's talking about are hot puddings here, cook it up and serve it hot. She says, don't eat that stuff. It debilitates the stomach. Page 91 again, she says, I do not approve of eating much cold food. Now she's going the other way. For the reason that the vitality must be drawn from the system to warm the food until it becomes as the same temperature as the stomach before the work of digestion can be carried on. So some people do that. They eat food right out of the refrigerator. They put it on the plate. You eat it along with the warm food. You have that cold food and the warm food. It goes in, and the stomach can't do a thing. It has to warm up that food so it's the same as the other food, and then it can digest it. So we shouldn't be eating hot food, and we shouldn't be eating cold food. For the same reason, it's debilitating to the stomach, and nothing's working. Again, on page 95 of that book, hot soda biscuits are often spread with butter and eaten as a choice diet. But the feeble digestive organs cannot but feel the abuse placed upon them. Okay, we're starting to learn some things about heat, cold. The stomach has to deal with those temperatures and has to do something with them. We'll find out more as we go along. Father, we thank you that you are telling us these things. It's not to take something away from us, but we've made a habit of using things incorrectly, things that really do injure us, and we wonder why we're sick. Help us to find your way, to live your way, and to have health.